China is sinking into the most high-profile corruption scandal of Xi Jinping's entire rule. And it is happening at the worst possible moment, just as the escalating trade war with the United States threatens not only the country's economic future, but the entire power structure built over the past 10 years. According to sources in China's Ministry of Defense, several high-ranking generals and officials from Xi's inner circle have been detained in a large-scale anti-corruption operation. These arrests are not just internal purges. They strike at the very heart of China's political stability and could trigger a systemic crisis. According to the South China Morning Post and several leaks from Taiwanese sources, the scandal involves a complex scheme to siphon off budgetary funds through defense contracts, using fake research institutes, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Preliminary information suggests that over the past 4 years, more than $9 billion United States dollars, officially allocated for strengthening China's military power, were funneled through this network. In reality, the funds were spent on villas in Malaysia, apartments in Dubai, private jet flights, yachts, and luxury gifts for elite families in Beijing and Shanghai. Many of those detained are former deputy defense ministers who oversaw procurement for the rocket forces, navy, and air defense systems. Among them is Zhang Yaohui, one of Xi's closest allies, who accompanied him on an inspection tour of the southern military districts just 2 years ago. According to Nikkei Asia, Zhang may have served as a key link between officials and the shadowy networks where defense funds were diverted. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The true scale of the scandal is shocking even seasoned analysts. For the first time in years, sources in Beijing openly admit that the anti-corruption campaign is no longer just a tool for consolidating power. It has become an emergency effort to prevent a complete breakdown of the state apparatus. Even more alarming is that many of those arrested had invested in strategically sensitive sectors, from drone manufacturing to satellite reconnaissance systems. In other words, people in close proximity to China's National Defense Command use these resources for personal enrichment. Now, it is unclear what condition China's defense sector is actually in. The scope of the fraud is so vast that, according to Rand Corporation analysts, some units of the People's Liberation Army are effectively left with no real funding. It has all been consumed by these schemes. But the bigger danger lies elsewhere. This scandal shatters the central myth that has underpinned Xi Jinping's legitimacy over the past decade, the myth of strict control, total discipline, and clean governance. Xi rose to power and conducted political purges under the banner of fighting corruption. Now, his closest allies are at the center of massive financial misconduct. This is no longer an isolated incident. It is a full-blown crisis of trust. According to insiders in the Communist Party, the collapse of the system began when a special inspection unit directly under the Military Discipline Commission, an agency created in 2016 to monitor top officers, was brought into the investigation. Even in the earliest stages, dozens of irregularities were uncovered. As Hong Kong analyst James Chen notes, for the first time in a decade, internal discussions are surfacing within the party over whether Xi is being betrayed by those he personally elevated to power. Amid this turbulence, China is entering a new phase of confrontation with the United States. The trade war, which began under Trump, is reaching a decisive stage. All of this is happening against a backdrop of tightening technological restrictions and efforts to reshape global supply chains without China's participation. At such a moment, one would expect Beijing to demonstrate unity and readiness to confront external pressure. But instead, the country is visibly unraveling, shaken by corruption scandals on one side and by declining trust in the yuan, capital flight, and shrinking foreign investment on the other. And here arises the central question: are we overestimating China's power? According to official statistics, China's economy is the second largest in the world, with a gross domestic product of nearly 18 trillion United States dollars. In terms of purchasing power parity, it has long ranked number 1. Its military is the largest on the planet. Its nuclear arsenal is expanding rapidly. Its space program launches satellites every 2 weeks, and its export power is displacing Western manufacturers across Asia and Africa. But all of this may be nothing more than numbers on paper. Behind the facade of the Chinese economic miracle, a familiar reality is increasingly emerging: systemic corruption, loyalty, taking precedence over professionalism, fear replacing initiative. As highlighted in the latest report from Transparency International, in the year 2025, China ranked 79th in the world in terms of perceived corruption, despite the Chinese Communist Party's official claims of total control. Too much depends on personal connections, clans, and party factions. In such a system, even the military and security services cannot function effectively. As noted in The Diplomat, many of Beijing's defense projects that exist on paper either do not function or are stuck in a state of eternal prototype. The performance of major drones, missile systems, and hypersonic weapons remains largely unknown, even to Chinese analysts. A recent scandal involving falsified reports on hypersonic warhead tests, uncovered by Defense One, has cast doubt on some of the very capabilities Beijing once proudly showcased. Once again, Xi's personal reputation is taking a hit. He spent years cultivating the image of an infallible leader, a father of the nation to whom all loyally submit. But now, even within the Politburo, dissatisfaction is growing. Some regional elites are quietly watching the scandal unfold, unwilling to intervene. Others, according to Germany's BND intelligence agency, are already seeking backchannels to the West, hoping to preserve their positions in the event of a political shift. No one is saying this openly, but the logic of events is clear. For the first time, Xi Jinping finds himself in a vulnerable position. And it is not just that his inner circle has been discredited. The crisis is systemic. It reveals that China's entire power structure may be far less stable than it appears. While the West discusses new rounds of sanctions and Donald Trump calls for limiting Chinese influence in Africa and Latin America, a struggle for survival is unfolding inside China. Where once Beijing responded to external challenges with cohesion, the current crisis has fractured the elite. This is no longer an ideological conflict. It is a fight for control over assets, for personal security, for salvaging reputations. Against this backdrop, the Belt and Road Initiative is stalling. Many projects in Africa and Asia have been frozen, funding is shrinking, and the repayment rate on loans is approaching zero. This, too, is a vulnerability. China had counted on these international ties as an economic cushion under growing United States pressure. What comes next? No one knows. But one thing is clear. The scandal in China's Ministry of Defense was merely the trigger. It has shown that even the most tightly controlled systems are not immune to internal unrest, which means that China's stability may not be as monolithic as it appears from the outside. Xi Jinping still holds power, but for the first time in many years, it is no longer absolute. And at a moment when the United States is increasing pressure, Europe is distancing itself, India is strengthening its own regional bloc, and BRICS is beginning to fragment, this is the worst possible time for China to lose internal stability, because external enemies are always waiting for the moment when they can be helped by enemies from within. That is precisely why an atmosphere of nervousness now prevails in Beijing. Behind the scenes, discussions are underway about potential personnel reshuffles, tightened censorship, and even the introduction of temporary restrictions on the international contacts of certain officials. According to sources close to the State Security Committee of the People's Republic of China, scenarios are being considered for a complete overhaul of the military leadership to prevent further leaks and fragmentation within the armed forces. Moreover, control is being strengthened over strategic state-owned enterprises, particularly in the sectors of aviation, cybersecurity, and satellite communications. These are not merely crisis management measures. This is a battle for the regime's survival. And although Beijing officially declares complete stability, behind closed doors a fierce internal struggle is unfolding, one in which the stakes are nothing less than the political future of Xi Jinping himself.